I'd like to introduce you to Benny Estes, our product manager, who will be running the session. It's all yours, Benny.
Thank you, Jake. So today's going to be a totally live session. There's really no scripts. I'm going to be doing live demos on the Raspberry Pi board as well as the Arduino board. So if anything goes wrong, we're going to blame Jake. Okay? Deal. So
thanks.
We are myDevices, and we believe that the Internet of Things starts here. Our mission, quite simply, is to simplify the creation of IoT projects. And to do that, we've created Cayenne. Now, if you're here, you're obviously familiar with Cayenne. It's the world's first drag-and-drop IoT project builder that empowers all of you to quickly create IoT projects. So today, what I'd like to get into is first an introduction to Cayenne, a high-level overview of its features. Then we're going to get started using the Raspberry Pi. We'll then get started using the Arduino. We'll take a dive into the Cayenne community, talk about some upcoming features, and hear about any questions that you guys have, and I'd be happy to answer. As Jake said, go ahead and type the questions as they come into the chat. And Jake, please feel free to interrupt me as I go. But again, we'll also have time at the end for questions and answers. So with that said, you should see me on this live video feed. Hello, everyone. We're at the myDevices headquarters right now, and I'm at my desk. So if you see people walking by, that's okay. I'm on the Cayenne website right now, and I will go ahead and click sign in, get an account. If you're on the website, what you can see here are some of our features. I'm going to go over our customizable dashboard, our ability to remotely monitor and control from some of our apps. We're going to send an alert to my phone that's actually going to be sitting right here. We'll see a text message come in. We'll play with some triggers. We'll look at the scheduling, and of course, we'll view all of the Cayenne's great visualization tools. So I'm going to click sign in. I've already created an account, so I'm just going to sign into my account. And we're in. So Cayenne actually launched initially for the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to start with the Raspberry Pi. I'll click on Raspberry Pi. The first things I am told to do, make sure my Pi is powered on and connected to the internet, and to install Raspbian Jessie. So Jessie is the operating system that we want to use when we're putting Cayenne in the Raspberry Pi. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch video feeds so you guys can see my hands. I have a Raspberry Pi set up right here on my desk, and we're going to go ahead and go through the install process. So I've switched videos. We're not viewing my hands, but also view the dashboard here. So what I'm going to do now, first off, is I have Jessie installed on my SD card here, and I got that from the raspberrypi.org foundation site. I'm going to insert it into my Raspberry Pi, like so. This is a Pi 3, but Cayenne works on all of the Pis. It works on the Pi 1, the 2, the 3, as well as the 0. So I've inserted the SD card. You can see I have my Ethernet connection here. But if I wanted to use the onboard Wi-Fi module on the Pi 3, or if I wanted to insert a Wi-Fi dongle, I could just as well do that. I've simply chosen to use the hardwired Ethernet for this. And then I'm also going to plug in power here. So my Pi is powered on. Jessie's loaded, and just so you guys know, so you didn't have to watch me wire up these sensors, I've gone ahead and I've pre-wired. This is a BMP 180 temperature sensor here and pressure sensor, and then this is an LED, and that's what we'll be turning on initially through Cayenne. So what I'm going to do is I'm on step 3 of 3 for getting started with my Raspberry Pi. I'm going to copy and paste this code right here, and how I'm doing this, because I don't have an actual monitor set up that's connected to my Pi, is I'm using something called SSH. And please go ahead and research it outside of this if you feel free. Some of you are likely already familiar with it. But if you have a monitor next to your Raspberry Pi, you can go ahead and insert that HDMI cable into the Raspberry Pi and manually type the text that I've copied and pasted onto that I'm going to copy and paste. So you can manually do this. I'm just logging on remotely onto my Pi. And to do that, I have and just inserting the IP address of the Pi. And in case you don't know, every single Pi that gets shipped has a default login of Pi, which I've just done, and a default password of Raspberry. So I've typed those things in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste that code. You're going to see some lines. You're going to see the next line appear. I'm going to press enter. And now what's happening is Cayenne is installing on my Raspberry Pi. What you're going to see right now is it's rebooting, and that's because I haven't expanded the file system on my Pi. So what Cayenne does is it actually reboots the Pi and expands the file system automatically, which is a pretty nice feature. So you don't have to do that on your own. So I'm going to exit out of this now because the install is happening. As the install happens and as it moves through the process, you'll actually see the progress move here. So as I mentioned, it's expanding the file system right now. Then it will install the libraries. It will install the agent, what we call the Cayenne agent, some software components, device drivers, and then it'll reboot the Pi. Now, one thing I would like to go over at this point is the wiring. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Raspberry Pi, this part right here are called general purpose input-output ports. And this is the way that the Pi sensors, such as this BMP180 and this LED, connects to the Pi and sends data. So the BMP180 is basically going through these wires, sending data to what's called I2C ports on the Raspberry Pi, and then the LED is just picking a general port that's connected to the Pi here. A question that we do get a lot is what sensors are supported for the Raspberry Pi? And in order to answer that question, if you can view my screen here, is first, I went into the community right now, and I'm just going to do a quick search of supported sensors, operating systems, and Raspberry Pi. So this is a quick overview of sensors that are supported. Basically, out of box, what happens is with the Cayenne install, there's a bunch of device drivers that get installed onto your Pi. So now, as we'll see when we add our BMP180, it's able to be added to our dashboard without any code, without you writing any code whatsoever. Now, typically the next question is, well, what if I want to add a sensor that isn't on this list right here? One of the upcoming features that we're going to be doing is allowing you to insert your own custom code and write your own drivers. So now if you have a device X that you want to bring on and it's not on this list that we currently support, you simply upload your device driver, which allows the Pi to read the data from that sensor, and that data can now be populated into the Cayenne dashboard.
Hey, Benny.
So, yeah.
While you're on that topic, you had done a question to us, like saying maybe would we be supporting it in Ubuntu Touch app, or that she only sees iOS and Android, so they don't have one of them. Wonder if you'd ever use a different hardware. What was that? Did you say Ubuntu? Or Ubuntu or a native BB10 app?
Yeah, so we have got that has come up in the community, like using like Ubuntu Mate or some of the other Raspberry operating systems. And we are going to, our goal is to never be a blocker for any Cayenne member or user that wants to use Cayenne on whatever board. So that will be part of that upcoming feature to allow Cayenne to run something other than specifically the Jessie OS. And it does work for Jessie Lite as well, just to clarify that. We did support Wheezy, but once Raspberry Pi Foundation stopped supporting Wheezy, we stopped because it didn't make sense for us to support a dinosaur of a operating system that the Pi doesn't support.
Yeah, right. Another follow-up, somewhat similar by Emmanuel. Are you going to incorporate this with Watson from IBM, like talking robot or answering?
Yes. And actually, once I'll get into this at the end. Once we're releasing an API, and the hope is that our community members actually would contribute to, for instance, if there is some integration with an IBM Watson or like an Amazon Echo, that community members would go ahead and it would be a collaboration effort to get Cayenne working and communicating with like Watson or for instance, the Amazon Echo. And it would be a project that would slowly get built as community members add to it. And of course, we would add to it as well, but it's more of a community-based integration rather than, you know, the Cayenne community waiting on the myDevices team to do these one-off integrations. So in this sense, we are truly trying to teach a man or woman to fish rather than just handing out these individual fishes. So that's really what we've been heads down working on right now is implementing the custom code ability on the Pi so you guys can add whatever you want, and also coming out with an API so you can bring on any devices that you want. Yeah. So
Great,
I'm gonna exit out of this, and as you can see here, the install finished. This is my Cayenne dashboard that's appeared, and you can see that it comes with a couple default widgets. So the memory on the Pi, the CPU, the storage or the disk, as well as the network speed, CPU temperature, and processes. And one of the things that I like to do, I'm going to switch my camera angle, just to confirm that the Pi is indeed online and sending data, is I like to look at the CPU temperature right here, and I like to put my finger on the chip. And because the chip is running, and it's actually hotter than the outside air, as I put my finger on it, what should happen is you're going to see that value decrease a little bit because I'm actually going to be cooling down the CPU temperature. So hopefully there it goes. So it just dropped from 47 to 41. And again, we're totally blaming Jake if any mishaps occur. Okay, so here's the good news. We have our Raspberry Pi online. It's obviously connected and sending data to the Cayenne dashboard. So now what? Now I've already connected and hardwired these two sensors, so I'm just going to add them to the dashboard and immediately begin reading data, creating triggers or scheduling off of these sensors that I've created. So to do that, I click the Add New Device, and I'll show you the Pi itself as well here. So again, the wiring is already connected to the Pi. Now the sensor that we're connecting here is the BMP180. So I'm just going to leave it at that name as the BMP180. You can see my Raspberry Pi is already selected. I could choose between different widgets. So I could choose to view the data as a graph, a gauge. I'm just going to select value. I'm going to leave it as value. I can choose an icon. Since it's temperature, I'm going to choose thermometer. And then the altitude. That helps calibrate the pressure. I'm going to leave it at 0. I don't know if it was accurate or not, but for the purpose of right now, I'm not particularly concerned with that. So at this point, I'm going to click Add Sensor. And you can see two widgets did appear, and they are reading correctly the pressure over here and the temperature over here. Now these widgets, just so you know, they're a little bit squished. If I were to expand the screen here, you'd see them in their proper form, but I do want to show the video feed, so I'm going to keep them a little bit squished. But just so you know, the dashboard is a little bit like pinched in right now. Perfect, Facebook. And just to check, again, I always like to double check that we're connected here. I'm going to put my finger on this BMP180 temperature sensor. So I'm doing that right now. And we should see that temperature actually rise. So you see it's quite quickly and quite drastically already risen to 81, almost 81 degrees. If I take my finger off of that, we should see it slowly fall. So 79, 78, 77. So that's a very, very, very easy way to quickly get started with the BMP180 temperature sensor. And really, this can apply to any sensor for the Raspberry Pi that we've integrated with Cayenne. So now next is the LED. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Benny, before the LED, just a question from Ray was wondering how you switch easily from Fahrenheit to Celsius.
Sure. Great question, and it's funny. So we have a very involved community. If you click your community link, you'll see a ton of different people from all over. So Celsius actually is a big request or feature that was requested. So we're here in the United States, so we pick Fahrenheit, but obviously everyone else uses Fahrenheit or Celsius. So yes, we do allow Celsius. I'm going to do that right now. Each widget has a settings icon, which we can click. That's what I've done. So I'm clicking the settings, going into the settings, and you can change the unit right here from Fahrenheit to Celsius, and even Kelvin. I'm actually not sure who uses Kelvin, but you could use it if you want. So yeah, just click Celsius, and then it will change to Celsius.
Hey, and back to the sensors. A couple questions. Can I add any sensor I want? Can I develop a driver for a non-listed sensor? How can you address these sensors that are not in the library?
Got it. So I'll do the first question. So Cayenne, when you install Cayenne onto the Raspberry Pi, basically there's a set amount of device drivers that get installed. BMP180 is one of them. So the reason I choose the BMP180, well, first of all, it's a very popular sensor, as are all the sensors that are natively integrated with Cayenne. But basically what happens when I add the BMP180 on the dashboard, and once I click Add BMP180, it goes onto the Cayenne agent that gets installed on the Raspberry Pi. It says, we're looking for the BMP180 device driver. It finds the BMP180 device driver that was already installed, and it connects it with the device that I set as a BMP180. And as long as the device that I've added is wired correctly and is in fact a BMP180, then it will automatically appear on the dashboard. And I think we have something like 42 integrated devices or sensors, device drivers that get installed with Cayenne. That's the first question. That's why without any coding, really, we're able to quickly view data and watch increases, create triggers off that sensor. Now, the second question, can I add my own sensor? That has been by far the most requested feature, the biggest request in our community since we've launched. And we hear you guys. So we are adding the ability to add your own device drivers through a file location on the Pi. And that is going to just twofold increase the amount of sensors that Cayenne technically supports. The biggest sensor right now is probably the DHT11 and the DHT22, which is a temperature and humidity sensor, and that has something like 4,000 views on our community. So there's 4,000 people who have viewed that topic and want to add that sensor. Right now, myDevices, the Cayenne team is a blocker to letting our community add that sensor because we haven't released the ability to add custom code on the Pi. So once we do that, you guys can add any sensor you want to the Pi, and things will be great. Okay, so now adding the LED. I'm going to switch to the LED view. Now, we do have a direct integration, as you can see on my screen here, with the GPIO on the Pi. So I've added the LED to pin 23, the GPIO pin 23 on the Pi. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go here, and I'm going to GPIO pin 23. It's currently set to an input. I'm going to change it to an output. And what that enables me to do is send a high signal or a low signal directly to this LED, because that LED is connected to that pin. So right now it's low, but as I click right here, I'm going to change it to high. You can see that the light turns on. And what that's basically doing, well, it's actually quite self-explanatory. It's just sending a high signal to the LED. I can also send a low signal to turn it right off. And I like to do this initially before I actually add a widget for my actuators, just to make sure that they're working and connected and there's nothing like a bad resistor or whatever it is. So I can quickly and easily turn things on and off directly through this GPIO interface in Cayenne. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a widget to turn on that LED rather than use it directly from the Cayenne interface. So I'm going to go to the actuator section, and I'm just going to choose a generic digital output. Basically, a digital output is anything that you can turn on and off. So that's like an LED here. I'm going to select it. I'll change the name just to, I think it's a blue LED. Blue LED, it's already connected to my Raspberry Pi. Excuse me. I'm using the integrated GPIO on the Raspberry Pi, so I'm just letting them know that. The channel, if you remember, I said 23. I connected it to 23. And I'm going to choose a button as well as a light icon because it's an LED. So now I'll add that. and you can see it gets added to the dashboard. My BMP 180 widgets are still there, the temperature and pressure, and I can now use this button to turn the LED on and off, just like we did with the direct GPIO interface. Turn on, turn off. One thing I do want to mention, and I think it's worth it, is this is something that I use because I don't know, at least I personally don't remember all of the GPIO interfaces. So I always like to reference this quick card. So I'm using 23 right there, and then, yeah, just something for you guys' knowledge. It's called the Connecticut GPIO pin card. So this is how I've really quickly and easily added a sensor and an LED. So now what can we do? Well, let's create a trigger. So I can go to add new, and I'll create a trigger here. And the trigger that I want to do on this Pi is if temperature increases, we'll say turn on LED. So in order to make that trigger, I'm going to drag my device here. I'm going to select my temperature, the BMP 180 temperature. Now, I could send a text message. I just, for whatever reason, I'm just not going to do that today, but certainly you could send yourself a text message if the threshold is met. But I'm just going to turn on the LED. So I'll pick the blue LED in the van side. And when we test it, I think I could get it above 80 degrees. So that's what I will pick as my threshold. And it's that easy. I've now created a trigger. So the trigger says if temperature goes above 80 degrees, then turn the blue LED on. So I'm going to save that trigger. And there it is. I'm going to go back to my dashboard here. And my LED is on right now. I'm going to refresh the page. I think something weird happened. So I'm going to make sure that it's turned off. There, it's turned off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger onto the temperature sensor, and you can see the light turned on because it went above 80 degrees. That was really quick. So hopefully you caught that.
You missed
and there we go.
AC.
Yeah.
Hey, Benny, while you're on, because I'm getting a question again from Ray just about the dashboard, which is cool. Everybody's liking it, but he was wondering if there, is the dashboard web browser only, or are there specific apps for iOS and Android?
Yes, good question. So I guess you could say we have a web dashboard and a mobile dashboard. The web dashboard is browser-based, Chrome, Safari, Mozilla, and then the apps, we have a Google Play Store app for the Android phone, as well as an iOS store and iOS app for your iOS phone. We have had some requests to do a Windows-based app for Windows Phone. However, the user adoption for Windows Phone compared to iOS and Android, it's just we haven't done it yet. But we do have a thread for it on the community page. So if you have a Windows Phone and you want a Windows app, let us know on the community page. If there's enough users, certainly we'll look into doing a Windows app. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
thanks.
So this really was just the beginner session for Raspberry Pi. There's many other things that we could do with the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to switch now to Arduino. I think I'm a little bit over the timing I wanted, but that's okay. We have an advanced session tomorrow. Definitely come to that if you want to learn a little bit more about the Pi, and I'll get into things. So I'm going to switch over to the Arduino. Is there any other questions on the Pi before I switch over to Arduino?
Yeah, maybe just one quick thing. If you could just show that, once you set that trigger on the dashboard, can you just show where where does it show the trigger on the dashboard? Like, is there a specific place that shows the triggers once you've set them?
Yeah. So I went to the user menu, and then there's a scheduling option. I should show scheduling too. We'll get into that later. And then so I click triggers and alerts, and here's the trigger, and you can see there's actually a log here when the trigger was created, and then each time the trigger runs, it will show. Of course, it didn't show now. I'm not really sure why. We'll have to have the team look into that. But yeah, there's a trigger log.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna stay on my same account, and now I'm gonna add an Arduino. Actually, sorry, real quick. I did just want to show the scheduling feature. So we have triggers and alerts. we do have a scheduling feature as well, which you can think of as time-based triggers, right? So turn something on, turn something off at a specified time. So you can add an event that can be scheduled, event title, pick a time, even give time zone, repeat this event every day, every week, every month, and then you can add an action. So we can select, for instance, turn the blue LED on, you know, at this time. So check out the scheduling feature. It's pretty cool. It really helps with our users' home automation projects as well as different IoT solutions. And scheduling works for Pi and Arduino, so it works across all the devices. So adding a Raspberry, an Arduino. I'm going to go to my Add Device process, select Device Widget, choose in the microcontroller section, and I'm going to select Arduino.
Hey, now, before you go any further, Benny, just
yeah.
What about BeagleBoard? Somebody's asking, BeagleBone, you know?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of requests, and we are working and looking into BeagleBoard right now. We're actually talking with the BeagleBoard organization as well. They love Cayenne. They really want Cayenne to work with their boards, so it's on the roadmap. BeagleBoard, yes.
Cool.
And yeah. So I'm going to add an Arduino. I have an Arduino here at my desk that I went ahead and created for this session. I'm switching views again. So here's the Pi. I'm going to move this to the side, and I'm going to get started here with my Arduino. Now, if you're not familiar with Arduino, there's a lot of documentation that you can read. I would recommend going to Arduino's website. A couple things for getting started with Cayenne is, first of all, you need an internet connection. This specific Arduino happens to have a built-in Ethernet port like this, so I don't need a shield on top of it. But let's say I didn't, so I brought this out just for example. This is just a plain Arduino Uno that doesn't have a built-in Ethernet connection. What I can do is I can add an Ethernet shield on top of that. So the Ethernet port, or the Ethernet cable you would plug in there, and this just goes directly on like this, and now your Arduino that didn't previously have internet connection now has an internet connection. So this is a way that you can very easily get pretty much any Arduino online through an Ethernet shield or even a Wi-Fi shield. But again, mine has built-in because I'm special. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to power my Arduino on just to make sure everything's good. You can see the power light is on and that it has internet. That's what those lights are. Now, just like the Pi, I've added a couple sensors. I've added an LED here. I've wired them up. I've added a temperature sensor, which specifically is a TMP36 temperature sensor. And then this is a potentiometer. The Cayenne team over here actually calls it a potato meter just because it's much easier to pronounce. So the potato meter. Basically, it just lets you control the voltage. So I can twist it and we'll see the values. So we'll get into that and we'll add it to our dashboard. Going back to our dashboard, make sure you have the Arduino IDE installed. Make sure it's connected to a computer. Add the Cayenne library to your Arduino IDE. And then select the board and port in your Arduino IDE. Now, since this is a beginner session, I'm going to assume that you are a beginner. So I'm going to go through adding Cayenne to the Arduino IDE and actually submitting the code from the IDE all the way to the Arduino. So if you already know how to do it, come to the advanced session. We'll work on some pretty cool things like virtual pins and sending any type of data to the Cayenne dashboard from the Arduino. So I'm going to click Next, and at this point, I'm taken to a screen where I can select my Arduino board. So I'm using a Leonardo, so I'm going to select the Leonardo. And the Ethernet chip that I'm using is, the chip is the W5500. And I know that because I read about the Leonardo device that I was using. I just typed in Arduino Leonardo with Ethernet on board, and I saw that it was using the W5500 chip. So I'm going to use that sketch file in Cayenne. Now, this is important because we have specific sketch files for each type of shield that you can attach on your Arduino. For instance, the Arduino that I have right here is going to use a different type of library or sketch file that my Arduino with the shield on top of it would use. So it is important to know what shield you're using. So since I'm using the W5500 chipset on my Arduino, I'm going to go ahead and click that one. Now, automatically populate the code that you can use to get your Arduino online. So I'm going to copy and paste that. So now it's on my clipboard. And I'm going to open my Arduino IDE, which you can see right here. So one thing is there's actually, and if you don't know about this, you don't need to know, don't even worry, but there's actually two Arduino organizations right now. There's something called Arduino.cc and there's Arduino.org. Now, each of those, they produce the same Arduino devices. For whatever reason, they've split and separated. It's a whole dramatic thing, which I don't even need to get into. But I say that because there's two different IDEs you can use, and Cayenne works with both of them. There's a .cc Arduino IDE that you can download from the .cc website, and there's a .org IDE, Arduino.org IDE, that you can download from the Arduino website. I happen to be using the Arduino.org IDE. No reason why, that's just the one I'm using. You might be using the .cc. It is what it is. They both work. So that's just a quick note. To download it, you would just you could just Google Arduino IDE, click whatever comes up first. So like, yeah, this is the .cc one, and then download depending on what OS, what computer you have. So I'm going to assume you guys have already done that, or at least you can read about doing that. I've already installed the IDE. If you remember, I copied and pasted my code. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I just copied and pasted the code that the Cayenne dashboard gave me, and I put it directly into my IDE. And you can see here, this is pretty important. This is called your auth token. And basically what the auth token does is it gets installed on your Arduino, and it connects your Arduino to your Cayenne account. So that's why your auth token is very important. And in fact, if you guys are quick, you guys can steal my auth token and totally mess up this entire demo. So please don't do that.
Okay, hey, Benny, real quick, is it possible to code on ESP8266, which is the Arduino IDE?
Yes, yes, it is.
Cool.
And we actually have, if you go to our community page, we have a whole thread about the ESP8266 that where community members have contributed to getting the ESP online. And actually, something that's really cool, I can even go in this project later. But at the end of the hour, is there's a user who used the ESP8266 with Cayenne and actually made it go to sleep, and then wake up, sent a little data packet to Cayenne, and then went back to sleep. And what this did is it kept that ESP8266 running on battery power for, I forget what he said, a week or 2 weeks or something. So that really is when we're getting into some very, very like truly IoT solutions, where it's these battery-powered small devices that can communicate wirelessly over the internet, and they don't need to be plugged in anywhere. So you could pop that thing, and whatever your use case is. Very cool.
All right. Hey, Benny, let's also answer just a couple more questions before we move on, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just a couple quick things, like how many devices can I connect on the same project?
So I think the limit right now is 20. I think it's 20 devices. We just picked that. It's kind of an arbitrary number just to make sure there wasn't like someone somehow had put on 1,000 devices. No one has reached 20 devices yet, I don't think. But if you need more than 20 devices, let us know.
That's what I was going to say. Alejandro, let us know if you're over 20. And then another great question, from Nelson was saying, this may sound funny, but will the trigger work even though the browser is closed or the Pi is restarted?
If the trigger will work if the browser's closed. You don't actually need the browser for Cayenne to run. So you could actually create the trigger and totally run the trigger directly from your phone. So let's say you're at work and you're like, shoot, I really need to know if the temperature increases above 80 degrees because it's going to be a hot day. So you could go ahead while you're at work on your phone, set a trigger on your phone, and then you'll get a notification assuming, of course, your Pi or your Arduino with the temperature sensors at your house, you'll get a notification if the temperature goes above that threshold. Now,
and if the Pi somehow restarts?
If the Pi restarts, then the trigger will function as normal.
Good.
I imagine though, if the temperature reached like 80 degrees and all of a sudden the Pi restarted right when it was at like 79.8, and then after the Pi restarted and then the threshold while the Pi was restarting went above 80 but then dropped below 80. When the Pi came back online, the Pi would have never known, that device would have never known that the temperature was above 80 or not, because it was restarting and it wasn't alive. So I guess that would be some weird scenario where the trigger wouldn't run. But yeah, the Pi can restart and the trigger still stays. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to try to answer it, but I'm just a silly marketing guy, so I made sure to leave it to you. The problem.
Yes, that we can blame anything that goes wrong on you too. And one other thing to add, scheduling. So scheduling actually runs locally on the Pi, because the Pi has storage and an OS. We can actually store the scheduled events locally on the Pi. So let's say your Pi loses connectivity for whatever reason, and you have it scheduled to open or turn on a light or open a door lock, that will still work regardless of internet connection. So that's pretty cool and pretty important. You don't want to be locked out or whatever it is if you lose internet connection. Cool. So I'm going to continue with Arduino. I have my Arduino IDE open, and yeah, we went over the auth token. That's your auth token. Shouldn't be shared with anyone. And at this point, I'm going to one really important thing that I've seen happens a lot, is make sure you have the right board and port connected through your IDE. So in order to do that, I'm showing that right here. You go to your board and make sure your right board is connected. You can see there's a ton of different boards you can have. For instance, if I was using an Arduino Uno, I would select Uno. I'm using the Arduino Leonardo ETH or Ethernet, so that's what I'm selecting. I'm also going to go to my tools and make sure that my right port is selected. And what that means is your Arduino is connected to your computer, and your computer needs to know where your Arduino is, just what port. So I'm selecting port, it's called COM8, which is going to make sure that when I click upload on my Arduino IDE, that the code that I'm trying to upload uploads properly to my Arduino device and not some other device that's connected. So I'll select port 8. So at this point, my Cayenne library is installed on the Arduino IDE. And I've selected the right board and port. My code is here. My auth token's on. At this point, I'm going to click upload and save. So it's compiling the sketch. It'll upload. And I'm going to switch now to the device view so we can look at the Arduino. You can see it's still connected. It can take some time to actually compile your sketch and upload it, 20 seconds or so. One thing that I do like to mention, and that can be helpful, is viewing data from the serial monitor here. So if you click this, it's going to pop open a window, and you can see it. So it finished uploading. It's done. To get this window here, I click this button. This is nice because it sort of tells you what's going on in your Arduino. So you can see it's connecting to arduino.mydevices.com. That means it's connecting to Arduino, and you can see that it's ready. So this means it's ready, it's connected, and we can start building a project. So this is good. This is what you want to see. Sometimes it might say like invalid auth token, or it might say trouble connecting, and that usually means that there's something wrong with your internet connection on your Arduino. So this can be very helpful when you're troubleshooting for whatever reason. So back to our dashboard here, and there's the Arduino. You can see it's online, and my Pi is still online as well. We do offer some pretty helpful videos if you want to learn how to add actuators, add sensors, and add custom widgets. Now, what's nice about the Cayenne Arduino integration is that without changing the code that's on this Arduino device, you can go ahead and read data from it, just as long as it's wired correctly and onto your Arduino. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to add, let's do the LED first. So again, I'm going to go to my actuators. I'm going to click my generic digital output. And at this point, we'll name it, I think it's red. If it's not, then you can always change it. So now, because I have two devices, I can either select Raspberry Pi or I can select the Arduino. Obviously, I'll select the Arduino. Now, at this point, I choose connectivity. So the Arduino has different types of connectivity. It has analog pins over here. That's to read analog data, such as this potato meter. And then it has digital pins over here. And this is to read, or rather, mostly, well, you can read, but you can also do digital output, like the LED. So I've connected my LED to the digital side, and then this potato meter to the analog side. So I'm going to choose digital. And now I select a pin. Now, my LED is connected to pin 7 right here. So that's the pin that I'm going to select in my interface. I'll choose the widget button, choose the icon, light, and now I'll add the actuator. You can see LED has been added to my Arduino. If I turn it on, and I was right, it is LED. I can turn it on, I can turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. So yeah, it's that easy to add the LED. But now, let's say we want to read data from this guy right here. I'll go to my add device process, and this isn't an actuator because I'm not turning something on or off. I'm sensing something. I'm sensing a change in voltage. So I'm going to go to my sensors, and I'm going to select the generic analog input, because that's what this is. It's a generic analog input. I'll select it. I'm going to label this potato meter. I know it's kind of silly, but that's just what I call it. And this is analog. This is analog data, whereas this is digital data. So I'm going to select analog, and I'm going to select the analog pin it's connected to. If I follow the wire here, I can see that it is connected to pin A1. So I'm going to pick A1 in my interface. I'm going to choose a widget. I could choose graph, gauge, or value. I'll choose gauge, and then add the sensor. And it should pop up here. There it is. So now if I change this, we should see that data change on the widget. So I just turned it actually all the way, so it's at 0 right now. I'll try and turn it about halfway, and you can see it turns and reads the data in real time. I've now turned it fully the other way, so we should see the max value, which is 1023, and that's correct for our voltage. So I can turn it, and it reads data in real time. Now, each widget is drag and drop, in the sense that you can move it wherever you want, however you want to view the data. But depending on what widget you choose as well, you can view that data different ways. So I'm going into the settings right now of my gauge. Now, I already know that the minimum is going to be 0 and the maximum is going to be 1023 because we just tested that. So let's say I might want to have my lower limit threshold as 400, and I can choose my upper limit threshold as 800. And what that's going to do is that's going to determine the color and the gauge setting. So if you look at my dashboard here, it's now at 575, which is between 400 and 800. So let's go ahead and just play real quick with that specific gauge widget. So if I turn it all the way down below 400, what we're going to see is it should turn green because that is the lower threshold. If I turn it all the way to the right, above, as long as it's above 800, then we should see it turn red, just like that. And so that's one of the cool visualization aspects of Cayenne that we can view data with. One thing I do want to mention is our idea of custom widgets. So I mentioned that with Arduino, you can add any sensor you want, and this is true. So with custom widgets, you're able to, in your Arduino code, go find the library for the specific device you're using. Let's say you're using device X. you go out and download the DeviceX library onto your Arduino IDE, excuse me, and then use that library, flash it onto your Arduino, and it would know how to read the data from DeviceX and display it using Cayenne's custom widgets. I'll cover this in tomorrow's advanced session, the idea of virtual pins and custom widgets on the Arduino. But for today's session, I want to shy away from it.
Well, just before moving on, because while we're on widgets, Maxim had a great question, like can you use two widgets, like a graph and a gauge, for example, with the same sensor?
Not yet, but that has been brought up in the community, and it's going to be something that will allow. You should be able to view the data as a value and have a graph side by side. Totally.
And Benny, I know we're getting close on time. Would it be possible just to show one more trigger? Manon just wanted to see, can we set one more trigger?
Yeah. Just
show how that goes.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm gonna actually do a cross-device trigger. So what's really cool about Cayenne is Cayenne, you can think of it as the hub for all of your devices. So when you're adding a Pi, an Arduino, an ESP8266, once we open up the API, you can add pretty much any device you want. You know, once we get BeagleBone in there, you can make all of these devices talk to each other. So that's what we'll do right now. We'll do a simple trigger turning on the sensor on the Raspberry Pi, or we'll increase it, and we'll turn on the LED on our Arduino. I'm going to go ahead and show this happen right here. So this is the Pi. Okay, we can see that. And then here is the Arduino. Okay, let me just turn off the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi LED. Okay, so let's create a trigger. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to disable this trigger that we created earlier because they might conflict. I'll create a new one. I'll drag my Raspberry Pi over, drag my Raspberry Pi over, blah, 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 name that something. I will select the MP180 temperature. I think we chose 80, so I'll just choose 80 again. That seems to be a lucky number there, 80. And we'll drag my Arduino to the vent side, and we'll pick the red LED, just so I know what trigger. If temp increases, turn on Arduino LED. I'll save that. Go back to my dashboard, and actually, before I go to the trigger, this is definitely worth showing. So I can actually create a project dashboard, double dashboard. That's what we'll call it, if I can spell right. I can actually create a project dashboard here and have whatever widgets I want in that dashboard. So for instance, we're playing with the LED and the Raspberry Pi temperature. So there it is. So now I have a dashboard to strictly monitor only that, because that's what I'm concerned with. I also have a direct device dashboard here. So this is the dashboard for my Arduino. That's the dashboard for my Raspberry Pi. I can drag and drop and create a whole new dashboard monitoring different things. Okay, so let's do the trigger. I'm going to make the Raspberry Pi temperature sensor increase, which should turn on the blue LED. So you can see it went above 80, and immediately the red LED turned on. So that's as simple as it comes with the triggers there. And what's really nice, actually, what I really like is that the dashboard reflects the proper state. So even though I didn't physically push this button to turn it on, once the trigger occurred and it turned the LED on, then the dashboard reflected that the LED was turned on. So if I'm viewing remotely, and I don't have this video feed to actually verify, I can remotely confirm that the LED turned on. Okay, so Jake, I'm gonna wind down here. There's one thing that let me know if there's any questions that come up. There's one thing that I wanted to be sure to show, which is our community page. It's in the top right. I've clicked on the community. I am constantly on the community. We have moderators who actually started out as users just like all of you, But now they help with the community. It is a community for the community by the community, which is really, really cool. So yeah, if you have ideas or suggestions or run into issues, post on the community. We'll be sure to get back to you. And we actually have a project submission contest going on right now. So I just created a very simple project in a matter of, a few minutes. And you certainly could do that. So here's our project. I think we have like 10 projects already submitted. Read about it. There's a prize, a grand prize of $200, and everyone gets a participation prize. So I definitely recommend trying us out, and if you haven't already, and submitting your projects to Cayenne. As a team, as a Cayenne team, we love seeing all the projects that you guys submit. They don't just go unannounced. We actually have weekly meetings, and we make sure everyone sees the projects. We talk about the projects, talk about the use cases. One last thing, we have a doc section in the top right. If you want to read a little bit more, or you want to just dive a little bit deeper and want some good documentation about Cayenne, start here. We have getting started documentation features, the idea of custom widgets, sketch files, and all of our supported hardware. What's upcoming? The biggest thing right now for us is our API, our MQTT API. This is going to allow some of our hardened developers, if you will, and engineers to really expand the capabilities of Cayenne. Now you can bring on any device, publish and subscribe to certain data points on that device and display that data in Cayenne, just like I've showed here. I think that's a good beginner summary of Cayenne. And I really hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Jake, I think you need a mute. I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Well, hey, I was going to talk. Sorry. I was just going to say, also, you probably haven't seen it, but I posted on the questions as well as the chat the link for tomorrow's advanced session, which would be at the same time. So you do have to re-register for that. And then and we all look forward to that. I also wanted to point out there was a couple questions from Maxim and a couple other people. If we didn't get to you, well, we didn't, and we don't have time to get to you right now, but we'll be sure to reply back the email to any unanswered questions. And then, Benny, the best way to reach you as they're making projects and may have something come up is probably through the community, right? Is that how you want people to communicate with you throughout the process?
Yeah, you can reach me on the community, and the community is your best bet, because if I'm not around, I might be at a conference or something. Actually, I'll be at Maker Faire, New York. If any of you guys are going to be there, I'll be there. Please come say hi. I'll be in the Arduino booth. But use the community because not just me is going to answer. What we have, the whole entire Cayenne community is going to help you with your project, give input. There's many people who are much smarter than me. They're experts in their own field who are going to help you with exactly what you need on the Cayenne community. It's a place to really collaborate on your projects and get help. So use the community, but if you need, you can also email me. My email is dstis@mydevices.com, estis@mydevices.com. And I guess, Jake, if there's any questions, we might as well take the remaining 5 minutes, and I'll just answer any questions that came up. Or guys, if you have questions that you want to just quickly type, I'm here, and I'll answer whatever you guys want.
Yeah, let's do it. That sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, and
anybody else, if you want to jump up, you can jump up, and we'll just get these banged out.
Yeah.
So, okay. So how long of a time is the data for your graphs, and everything's stored? How long is it stored?
Yeah. So it is stored indefinitely. Yeah. As long as that device is online and you don't delete the device from your account, then we store that data. And we are doing a couple improvements to our data history. So I might as well just show the graph here. So we are doing a couple improvements here to show more data points. But yeah, so you can actually view the data. I've just, on my dashboard here, I've switched it to a live view, to a graph view. But we allow you to view that data live. We allow you to view it by the minute. so I've now viewed even though I've only had this DMP180 device for what, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, there's already data by the minute. And you can see when I did that trigger there, because there's an increase in that graph and then it dips back down. So yeah, by the minute, hour, day, month, all the way up to a year. And you can use a custom date range to filter that graph data.
All right, cool.
And if we're viewing the live graph, you can see I'm putting my finger on it and it's rising quite drastically. So.
Yeah, right. Cool. Yeah. And this is another question about the 2 widgets deal, you know. So we had answered the first part, but he was wondering, can we use 2 custom values with the same source of data on Arduino's code and then use them as the data for separate widgets, if that makes sense to you?
Yes.
So, yep, you got it.
Okay. So basically you would create a widget, or rather, you would send whatever data you're trying to get off of the Arduino to what we call a virtual pin. Now, you would then assign, let's say, virtual pin 1 and virtual pin 2 to separate widgets on the Cayenne dashboard. And so that's how you would view the 2 separate sets of data from the Arduino. It's through the use of virtual pins and then sending each virtual pin, assigning each virtual pin to a widget on the dashboard. So I think we have like 42 virtual pins or something. So you could have 42 widgets just from a single Arduino on your account. Yeah. And we'll go over that
great. Okay, one quick thing. How is the connection coded between the device here and the server in the United States? Is it behind my firewall? And I do know I don't want an idiot behind my firewall. Thanks. So how's the connection coded between the device here and the server in the United States?
It is, so it's, well, I'll have to get back. I'll get back on that question. So make sure you get the username and I'll reach out.
And then there are certain, Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's certain ports that need to be opened for Cayenne for your Pi or Arduino to actually connect to the servers, which I'll answer when I reply to that guy.
Okay, sounds good. I think we're good. We're good here, and like I said, anything that's coming in or hasn't come out. Hey, cheers to from Norway, from you. Thank you so much. I don't know if it's morning, night, or middle of the day there, but thanks for joining in. Well, it's not the middle of the day, that's for sure. Anyway, we will see you guys. Come back tomorrow. And thank you all for joining. And Benny, lots of kudos. Everyone's happy to see you, and somebody's seeing you tomorrow. So.
Oh, cool.
They're coming back on the sessions tomorrow. So,
awesome.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.